the new idea of India, that this is a vote for the old idea of India, an India that is driven by consensus, one that's driven by coalition, and the rejection of the idea of the supreme leader?
Rahul, Prime Minister Narendra Modi won a clean majority under the National Democratic Alliance, which is a pre-poll alliance, which went to the voters as a pre-poll alliance with a clear leader of Narendra Modi. I think there is no point politicking now. The elections have just gotten over. Let us all relax and analyze a bit dispassionately for once. Secondly, let us also take all polls with a pinch of salt. I mean, with due respect to my friend on the television today, Yashwant, all polls need to be taken with a pinch of salt, including this one. So to say that the new idea of India, or let us just directly call it Hindutva, has been rejected when the pre-poll alliance of Narendra Modi has won a simple majority, is stretching the idea of what a loss is and what a victory is. Let me also simply respond by saying that it is true. He mentioned something I had mentioned about foreign policy. The Chinese, encroachments into the subcontinent have increased. That is correct. However, the ratio of GDP of China to India has been stable to falling, actually, in the second term of Prime Minister Modi, whereas again, I don't want to politic, but under the UPA 1 and 2, it went from 2 times to 5 times. So the important point is this. There is a trend, there is a structural trend in politics, and then there are cycles around it, right? You kind of overshoot, then you mean revert, you overshoot in the other direction. The structural trend in Indian politics is towards Hindu consolidation, is towards the dilution of caste. And just like in 1993 UP polls, you had a massive verdict for the BJP, and then you suddenly had a Mandal moment. So there is always a mean reversion. But the overall structural trend is towards...
Okay, that's an interesting thought that you put out. Let's get Amitabh Tiwari in on this. You're saying that the structural direction is towards Hindutva, and the structural direction is towards a move away from caste. Do you buy that? Because if you see the kind of Dalit, Muslim, Yadav consolidation which really led to the downfall of the BJP in Uttar Pradesh, it would suggest that ground reality is different from what Harsh Gupta is suggesting. Amitabh Tiwari.
I think if we see the verdict, it does not seem to be indicating that the structural overall direction is towards Hindutva. I would say the overall structural direction is not towards an aggressive Hindutva, but the structural overall direction is towards a more liberal, compromising, consensus-driven. Because if you see, BJP's vote share remains the same. It has lost some amount of votes, or rather significant votes, amongst the SC, ST, OBCs in Maharashtra, Rajasthan, UP, even West Bengal to that extent. So what is clearly visible is that a section of the people, and see, India is a liberal country. Whatever we discuss, India remains a liberal country. An aggressive sort of an Hindutva is not liked by many people, largely the neutral and the middle class voters. If you see the class-wise voting as per CSDS, the poor and the lower socioeconomic class people have largely, the voting pattern towards the BJP has remained the same. So they have been able to hold on to that. However, amongst the middle and the rich class, BJP has lost, or the NDA has lost 3% each vote share according to the CSDS poll data.
Okay, let me put that question to Yashwant Deshmukh. Everybody wants to come in, and this is really getting exciting as far as the debate is concerned. Everybody has their opinion. We're trying to look at the data. This argument that this is a rejection of Hindutva, or the argument that the trend is towards a consolidation of Hindutva and a dilution of caste, do you buy that? Or do you think that while, Hindutva proponents would like to believe that, the real data from this election suggests that's not the case?
Well, I tend to agree with Amitabh on this thing that, Hindutva as a base is very much there. I mean, so much so that electoral politics has changed in a way that you cannot, dump Hindutva and win electorally. You cannot be against Hindutva in that way. So, I have said this more often than not that, that you can be pro-Muslim and win election. Not an issue. You cannot be anti-Hindu and win election. That's not going to happen. But at the same time, Rahul, one thing verbatim across the spectrum, including even bigger section among the BJP voter, NDA voters has come in, that Hindutva is fine, Mandir is fine, ye Hindu Musliman jara kam kijiye. You know, this is something which has come across.
No, but how do you say it? You know, is that your view? Ye Hindu Muslim kam karo, is that your view, or do you have data to back that?
No, we have data to back that, but we thought that we will do a complete episode on that, Rahul. We are gonna ask specific questions on that. We will come back with the results on that, because one thing is very clear: people want economic to do good. People want Hindutva as a base. I mean, I'm talking about the BJP voter. They appreciate Ram Temple. Everybody appreciates Ram Temple. But ये हिंदू मुसलमान ज्यादा किया है, ज्यादा हो गया है. This is a general sentiment, not just among the opposition voters, but among the core NDA voters as well.
I want to take this question. What caused the BJP's defeat in Faizabad? So let's see how these are not voters in the seat of Ayodhya. These are general voters. Let's see how they respond to this question. So if I look at the overall numbers, 22.3% of overall voters think that BJP lost in the seat of Ayodhya because there was too much focus on Mandir. 11% say anti-incumbency against the sitting candidate Lallu Singh. 12% say it's because Samajwadi Party fielded Dalit candidate Avdesh. And 36.7% say it's because of BJP's overconfidence. Remember, these are not voters in Ayodhya, so they actually have very little say. But this is their broad sense, that 36.7% feel the BJP lost because of overconfidence, that somehow they just convinced themselves that they were winning, that they became victims of their own hype. Do you buy that, Shankar Iyer? This idea that they probably became victims of their own hype, they started believing their own propaganda?
Well, to start with, they announced a 400 target and didn't bother to explain it to the voters as to what it was about. So it was left to open to interpretations and fears. So interpretations and fears have led to the loss of seats and erosion. The point that we are making about Hindutva, here's the thing. Any time and every time there is an attempt to homogenize a heterogeneous society, it is to make a one image of a plural country, a country of many diversities. It will backfire. It will boomerang. The point that Amitabh made and Yashwant made subsequently is that people are invested in the idea of India being a Hindu society. That idea cannot be leveraged beyond a point for creating a majoritarian state or a majoritarian government. This has happened before, this has happened now. The point that every voter seems to be sort of underlining, whether it is in Maharashtra, whether it is in Uttar Pradesh, whether it is in West Bengal, whether it is in Rajasthan, is that livelihoods matter. And you cannot just say that, okay, January happened and the rest you have to sort of live with it. There is a very old saying from the epics in Mahabharata, fear the tears of the poor, for they can drown the mightiest. I think that is a message that has come through across states, and that is a message that has been observed by the government. The first decision of the government to create 3 crore new houses is both a political compulsion and an economic imperative. And that is where I think Mr. Modi excels in bringing together what he has heard on the ground and how he
Haj Gupta, respond to Shankar Iyer's very important point. This is not so much about new idea, old idea of India. This is not about pro, anti-Hindutva. This is about listening to the voice of those at the bottom of the pyramid, giving them the economic alleviation that they crave. That this is really what the verdict is about. Listen to concerns of those who are at the bottom of the income pyramid.
Rahul, with 640 million voters, there is no monocausal explanation of any election, much less this election. The point is not that. When I mentioned there is a structural trend in Indian politics, to compare 2019 to 2024 and say that is a structure is the exact opposite of the definition of structural. The structural trend is always a longer term trend. I mentioned there is always mean reversion and overshooting. So to compare 2019 results in 2024 and say that over time Hindu consolidation is not happening is not an academic or rigorous enough answer. Now on the point of Hindutva or aggressive versus non-aggressive, Hindutva, liberal, pluralism, these are all false binaries. These are false divides. Hindutva is nothing but Hinduism. So to say that it is homogenizing is simplifying, homogenizing the discourse itself. I just want to simply say I fully agree. Economic uncertainty, economic pain, as well as overconfidence, as you mentioned, Rahul, in the Faizabad survey, I fully agree those are real causes. Let me remind you that in FY24, nominal GDP growth was less than 10%. The deflator was 1.5%, and which is why the real GDP growth was more than 8%. But for the normal person who's not thinking in terms of inflation adjusted, his salaries or his income grew less than 10%. It is my personal opinion. It is also the opinion during vote on account that the government has been fiscally and monetary policy wise, that includes the RBI, slightly too conservative. In retrospect, obviously, it's easier to confirm that they were perhaps overconfident. And I fully agree with Shankar that the first decisions by signing the, for example, Kisan Nidhi, the second decision of having millions of more homes, shows there is already a feedback mechanism.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, respond to this, that the government was being careful about public finances, which is why they didn't resort to the kind of freebies and populism that the Congress promised. Harsh concedes that maybe this was too tight and they should have loosened up a bit more. It would have helped them, but it's against Prime Minister Modi's fiscal grain. He likes to be conservative. He doesn't like the idea of freebies. They've heard the message and now they'll be more willing to open the purse strings, like we saw during the PM Awas Yojana announcement or during the food grains announcement. There will be more such welfare measures.
You know, Rahul, one of the most shocking statements that Prime Minister Modi made, beyond his bhais and all the Mangal Sutra and all the pretty repugnant gibberish that we heard, was when he told, I think, interviewers, I don't know whether it was on your show, that, what do I do? Some people have to become rich and some people will remain poor, something to that effect. And this coming from India's Prime Minister, I thought was appalling. This is a country which is seeing an absolutely, very dangerous level of economic inequality.
That's not what he said.
People have no idea how many people are suffering at the bottom of the pyramid. Mr. Modi takes credit, by the way, for a man who says, I'm a right-wing, economist thinking man, free market pro. He allows 56% of India's population to get 5 kilo of food grains for the next 5 years and says, well, I have removed poverty. You had Niti Aayog actually telling you that the poverty levels changed within 1 day. So the truth that people have to accept it. I'm telling you, Rahul, I say so. And I challenge anybody from the BJP to take me on. The world does not trust their data. The world does not trust India's GDP. Somebody mentioned GDP deflator. I'll tell you the problem. They have used these deflators to keep the real GDP growth high. But if that was the case,
let Harsh respond to it.
Where are the jobs?
The charge that you're making the data seem a lot better than it actually is by fudging it, by inflating it, that India is doing a China.
Absolutely.
And therefore you get convinced that India is growing really fast, but for those who it matters, they feel, no, we're not growing fast.
Rahul, just like in FY24, the GDP deflator was around 1 to 2%. In FY23, the year before that, it was almost double digit. The same government, the same data, which is why when the nominal GDP growth was 18-19% in FY23, they did not show 15-16% real growth. So this is simply a base effect. Let us again, I'm requesting Sanjay to understand, the election is over. The next election is some time away. We don't have to do this rhetoric.
Yeah, but let's not fudge around with data.
We are dispassionately analyzing what happened. The GDP deflator was very high.
Sanjay, let him speak. You're not being fair. I'll come back to you. Let him speak.
The deflator was very high in FY23 and the base effect in FY24 was very low, which is why you can see that even in the listed companies, the revenue growth in FY24 was in single digits, but the profitability was 20% plus because the cost pressures came down. So this is not just government data. You can corroborate that with financial market data as well. So to say that this is not the data, nobody believes that this is like the Chinese Communist Party. That is absolutely untrue. What is true is that the census is overdue. The pandemic delayed it. We must do the census. We must update, for example, the 2011-12 base to have more updated inflation data. By the way, the hundreds of millions of people getting free food of 5 kgs, that is not included properly in the CPI data. And which is why the government gets a hit on the fisc, but does not get a free ticket on the monetary policy. This is a problem because you are giving free food that is there on the fiscal side hit, but it is not counted the way CPI is counted. Core inflation in India has been below 4% for more than 7%. Food inflation is above 4%. But then that does not account
Okay.
for 5 kilos.
Rahul, a quick
So
response.
I want to come to the next question. This is to do with, just one second, Sanjay. I'm coming back to you, but since this is a show around the questions that we've asked, I want to ensure that none of the survey effort goes waste. So just bear with me for a moment. What worked for the Samajwadi Party Congress India Alliance in Uttar Pradesh? Now, if I look at the various options and take you through what different categories of voters have said, 22.5% say there was consistent messaging on unemployment, which is what worked. 26% of the respondents say constitution is in danger, Samvidhan khatre mein hai, that's the pitch that worked. 24.1% say it's all of the above. So not too many think it's a smooth alliance. Not too many think it's to do with the Pichda, Dalit, Alpsankyak card. Most think it's because of the fact that they had this idea of constitution is in danger, and 22.5% say it's the messaging on unemployment, and 24% say it's all of the above. So I want to put this question first to Yashwant Deshmukh. Yashwant, this idea that Samvidhan khatre mein, BJP is considered to have the best narrative factory or propaganda machine, or get their voice out, get their message out to the public, typically. But this issue about Samvidhan khatre mein, it's almost as if the opposition created an issue where it didn't really exist, picked the constitution in their hands and ran with it with such ferocity that it really became one of the biggest issues of this election. And the BJP tried very hard to counter it through the barbs on Muslim reservation, etc., but they simply couldn't.
Well, Rahul, even more interesting is the point that be it India voters, be it NDA voters, they are kind of agreeing on these pointers. What has worked and what didn't work for that. And that's a very interesting way of looking at how the public is reading the mandate, And yes, the opposition was smart enough to twist that change in the constitution tune with the reservation that they will, bring down the reservation policy, and like that, politics is about how you fix the narrative, how you toe the narrative. And BJP, by and large, in the 10 years has been a champion of that. But I think this time, on this particular narrative, I think on this one occasion they had to face the checkmate on that. Reason being, after a long time, and probably when those who are watching or going through the social media and everything, I could sense, I might be completely wrong, Amitabh, but I could sense that BJP's entire social media narrative mechanism could not match the narrative mechanism.
Harsh Gupta, do you concede this? Usually it's the BJP that sets the agenda, the opposition is scrambling, trying to respond. Here, the opposition created an agenda which never existed. There was no real plan of ever dismantling the constitution, but yet they put it out with such ferocity, and it also happens only when people are willing to believe it. So obviously people felt there was a grain of truth, and one thing led to another. It became one of the biggest issues, and the mightiest narrative machine that we know couldn't counter it.
So, Rahul, I'm not fully disagreeing with you. Let me just say, let us be very specific. To run fake videos, completely fake videos of former president and current home minister, BJP president, Amit Shah, saying that quotas will be removed, caste quotas will be removed, when he, as you rightly mentioned, never ever said that, I would not exactly use the word smart for that. I would use the word fraudulent or cynical for that. But nonetheless, I fully agree with your point that perhaps if there are a lot of people willing to buy it, there is some introspection necessary to be done about the broader narrative without in any way denying the fraud that was done. And therefore, to that extent, the BJP's overall social media might need a course correction, because in 2014 to 19 to 2024, it was perhaps more organic. Of late, perhaps it became slightly inorganic. That does not mean that they did not do a good job. We should also not discount the fact that a lot of foreign powers spent a lot of resources for influencers who were not necessarily living in India to try to influence this election.
Okay, Sanjay Jha is blaming social media influencers allegedly paid by foreign powers, like Indira Gandhi is saying, Videsh ka haath hai isme, in the Modi defeat. Or not, this is far from a defeat, frankly. Just the fact that there were, which is why we need to look at victory and defeat in the right lens. 240 is still one of the best performances by any party in modern India. But he's saying Videshi powers ka haath hai. Let Sanjay Jha respond to that.
The right wing is expert in creating conspiracy theories and fake news, and they have been answered in this election. Let me also tell you, Rahul, for the benefit of your viewers, Modi's 240 is actually, frankly speaking, a defeat, political and moral, because this was not a level playing field contest. I think this is what every citizen in this country needs to know, and they know it today. The capture of regulatory authorities, the vulnerability of the election commission, large sections of the big media becoming the cheerleader. You had tons of money through electoral bonds lying with the BJP, arresting of the opposition, chief ministers. It was a brazen, one-sided show, which is the cockiness which made Modi say, I'm winning this election, and start celebrating, the next 100 days. You remember in Bihar, he was campaigning. I mean, he made a statement that I thought was absolutely reprehensible, where he talked about Tejasvi Yadav, the countdown to his arrest has begun. This was the narrative of the BJP. And here is the truth, Rahul. Here is the truth. The truth is that social media is inherently an anti-establishment platform.
Sure.
The BJP used it in 2014. Today, it is now questioning the BJP and Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi, by the way, is in memes all over. But why are we forgetting that the CSDS survey said that Rahul Gandhi as a prime ministerial candidate is more popular than Modi in Uttar Pradesh. The defeat in Ayodhya is a message that no matter how hard the gentleman here in this program can try, the new idea of India, one strongman leader, personality cult, sectarianism, authoritarianism, has been rejected.
Yashwant Deshmukh, I'm out of time. One very final question. What would you as a data analyst be looking at most carefully from here on? What do you think matters most in determining what happens next?
Well, I think the leadership ratings are going to be the central of that, because no matter what, even though we are parliamentary system, but the way we think is pretty much presidential, and it is getting more and more around that. And this is why majority of the really strong chief ministers have won their states, defeating BJP in the last 10 years. And this is why even in the worst of this last 10 years thing, where at the national level, the BJP manages to be the single largest party and NDA crosses the majority on its own, all because of Prime Minister Modi's popularity. So having said that, what Sanjay is mentioning, that data point is, Sanjay, a bit not very, I won't contest that, but it has to be seen with the lens that if you are running a two-horse race in Uttar Pradesh right now, where Samajwadi Party voters are behind you, then you are likely to get that kind of result, particularly when you have a significantly big number of voters propping up Yogi's name. But as far as Yogi and Modi are considered, they belong to the same party, same category. So it's a win some and lose some logic, Sanjay. I understand your point where you are coming from.
Okay.
And this is what precisely is required. If the opposition wants to take it forward, they have to have a central narrative. They won, and they won a number of seats, creating a local narrative, which was a very smart thing to do. But at the end of the day, when you are running the country, there has to be a central narrative. So we need to see how that contest of narratives in the parliament and outside the parliament goes from here, Rahul.
Okay,
That's a
very fascinating conversation. This 40 minutes of very high quality insights. I want to thank all our guests for joining us in this edition of the Political Stock Exchange. I hope to pick up important issues of the week in the days and weeks to come, and keep doing this because it gives you insights into not just what the pundits are thinking, but also what voters across the country are thinking on this key issue. So thank you very much for joining us. We're slipping into a break. When we come back, as the capital reels under a heat wave, water war rages. What's making Delhi go dry? An India Today special investigation, Operation Water Mafia, coming up on the other side. Political Stock Exchange tracker for us. So a sample size of 2,215, margin of error is about 5%, and field dates are between the 7th and the 10th of June. So this is a long-running tracker that we have with C Voter, and we ask people questions which we think are important that week. And I'll take the first question from this week's tracker of the Political Stock Exchange. Can Prime Minister Modi handle the compulsions of a coalition government? So let's take you through the responses to this question and show you what voters and respondents in this India Today poll really have to say. So you look at the divergence between those who are NDA voters, where three-fourths of the respondents say yes, he can adapt, and amongst India Alliance voters, 47% say he may find it difficult. Whereas amongst the NDA voters, many more say that he can adapt. So far fewer believers amongst the India Alliance voters and far fewer naysayers amongst the NDA voters. That is quite along predictable lines. Will he be unable to run? Only 5% of NDA voters think he'll be unable to run, whereas 22% of the India Alliance voters think he will be unable to run. So if you just look at the overall percentages, I think is really where the meaning comes out. 52% of the overall respondents think yes, he can adapt. 30% say he'll find it difficult to adapt. 13.5% say he cannot adapt. 4% say they don't know. But 50% saying yes, he can adapt. 3 in 10 saying he may find it difficult. Let me introduce you to some of the guests joining us for this week's edition of the Political Stock Exchange. I have Harsh Gupta Madhusudan, author of A New Idea of India. Amitabh Tiwari is an election analyst and researcher. Shankar Iyer joins me, political economy analyst and author. Sanjay Jha is with us as well. I want to go across to Amitabh Tiwari first, because you got a situation where 50% plus respondents, 52.1 say yes, he can adapt, because Prime Minister Modi is oftentimes proven his detractors wrong. How will he do foreign affairs? You know, he showed he can do it. Oh, he's got a provincial Gujarati mindset. Can he run India? He showed he can do it. So I think on balance, in response to this question, the majority of respondents seem to think, yes, he can adapt to the compulsions of a Modi government, Amitabh.
Yeah, almost 52% plus people or respondents agree that Modi can adapt because to the demands of the situation and can run a coalition government. Of course, the numbers are tilted towards the NDA voters 3/4, whereas 1/4, only 1/4 of India voters feel that he can adapt. But if you see, even amongst the India voters, less than 1/4 people feel or respondents feel that he will be unable to run the government. So not a significantly higher proportion of people, even amongst the India voters, feel that he will not be able to run the government. Still, the numbers are, you could say, 52 overall say he can adapt because he has the administrative experience as a CM and a Prime Minister of running governments, not coalition, but he has run governments. And he also, see, it is all about sharing a personal rapport with two key people, which is Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu. So we've seen that on the global stage, he does share a great rapport with global leaders. So probably he just needs to replicate that.
Also, Harsh, you know, often we've seen Prime Minister step up to the plate and prove his detractors wrong. You know, those who said, okay, what does a chief minister know about foreign affairs? He doesn't have that much international exposure. He's never really studied abroad. What does he know about the economy? During COVID, they said, open your purse strings or your economy will be doomed. He kind of kept things tight. Now everyone acknowledges that that was the right point. Harsh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay,
I can hear.
so I'm saying he's proven his detractors wrong in the past, and now a majority of the respondents in the C voter sample seem to suggest he can adapt to handling a coalition government.
Rahul, I'm sorry, I was unable to hear the question entirely. There was some background noise. Let me just respond to what I heard. I absolutely agree that he'll be able to prove his detractors wrong. Remember when he became the Prime Minister for the first time in 2014, everybody was saying that foreign policy would be his weak suit. And we all know that he proved his detractors spectacularly wrong. In fact, India has managed to balance relationships with, for example, the Arab Gulf countries on one hand, Iran to some extent on the other hand, and Israel. Some of the closest allies of Prime Minister Modi are today from the Gulf states, MBS and MBZ. If you went by conventional wisdom that Muslim majority countries or Muslim sultans would not be friendly with the Prime Minister, that was obviously completely wrong. Similarly, he's handled the Russia-Ukraine crisis very well while remaining friends with the broader West, but also openly admitting about the strategic relationship that India has long held with Russia. So compared to those very complicated figures, I don't think domestic political machinations will be a huge problem. We saw that the Prime Minister was at Chandrababu Naidu's inauguration today in Andhra, and it seemed he has shared a very warm rapport. We must also keep in mind that Nitish Kumar, Prime Minister Modi, and Chief Minister Naidu, they're all in their 70s now, and all of them are looking for legacy issues right now. So the push and pull of coalition politics and ek dhakka aur do aur ek baar aur kheench lo, while I'm not saying that's completely gone, all three figures are in a phase of their political career where they want to leave something tangible behind. So let's not completely discount that aspect and be completely cynical.
Okay, I want to come now to the question of the expectation from the 100-day plan of the Modi government. Everyone has their own expectation. They've seen, they've processed, distilled this verdict. What expectation do you have from the 100-day plan of the Modi government? Let me take you through the responses to this question and see how different kinds of voters really line up on this question. So if you look amongst NDA voters, 24% want inflation to be controlled, 35% want unemployment to be dealt with, 8% think fuel is a big idea, government hospitals is 16%. So that's the thinking amongst NDA voters. Amongst India voters, 29% want unemployment to be dealt with, 14% want fuel prices to be slashed, 20% want inflation to be controlled. If I look at the overall sample here, 31.4% in this C voter sample think unemployment and a policy to deal with the youth, to create jobs, needs to be the number one concern, with inflation at 23 coming in as the number two concern. So if you look at the big picture there, Shankar Iyer, dealing with the issue of unemployment, having a policy for the youth, I think that seems to be the central thrust of our sample, saying treat this as priority number one in your 100-day plan.
Well, it's not surprising, is it? The Mood of the Nation poll of India Today has flagged this issue of unemployment consistently for over 2 years. And this is something that I think you have discussed on Political Stock Exchange quite a bit, and Yashwant will sort of give out the numbers if he has the tracker on this. His tracker must have got the historical picture on this. The question always, Rahul, is how do you deal with what you heard at the campaign? And in the campaign, there is no doubt that unemployment has been a big issue. The erosion of margins and the erosion of seat count shows that there has been issues. Wherever there has been distress, both agri-distress or youth unemployment has sort of popped up on the final outcomes. So the question about unemployment is really how do you rejig the economy to create jobs? How do you sustain jobs? And in this, there is the immediate and the legacy issue, which is much of the reforms that need to be done are vested in the state governments. The BJP rules over 12 states, and they have not exactly been proved to be the model states that Mr. Modi created in Gujarat. And the second part of it is agricultural distress. So the center withdrew the law on farm reforms. Did the states adopt it? I don't think so. The third part is that we have a futuristic challenge ahead of us. India's largest exports are services, IT services exports. India's largest private sector employer is the IT sector. AI is impacting already, it's visible, these two factors. How does the government look at this? How does the government address this? Those are the issues that people want addressed. There is a definite anxiety about the future in the economy, particularly in the 18 to 35 age category, which seems to have for the first time moved away a bit from the BJP in the exit poll data that Pradeep Gupta had put out. So I think the big question, whether he is able to manage a coalition or not, Rahul, is about how he deals with issues, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Okay, so now let's come to the next question. I want to introduce Yashwant Deshmukh as well, who's now joined us. And I want to deal with the question about the opposition. Will the results lead to a stronger opposition? I think that's the critical question. Let's look at the responses to this question. So amongst India voters, 71% saying yes, it will lead to a stronger opposition. Amongst NDA voters, 52% saying yes, it will lead to a stronger opposition. 31.2% of NDA voters saying no, it will make no difference. If I look at the overall numbers, 62% of the respondents feel that yes, this will lead to a stronger opposition. So what's very clear, Sanjay Jha, is that the people's expectation is that this verdict will lead to a stronger opposition. And that's really one of the key expectations from this verdict, that, okay, a stronger opposition which can keep the government in check.
Yeah, absolutely, Rahul. Let me tell you that this is basically not a mandate for one political party to govern India. So when I tell you, for example, that it is a fractured mandate, because the BJP was hoping to win 370 or 400 seats on their own, we need to realize this is the people's verdict, not some rhetoric that we are indulging in just because we are part of the opposition. And the fundamental point, is this, that when you look at the issues, they were flagged off in a CSDS survey long earlier, even when the elections were on. My basic concern with this government, and it will be tested soon, is that this government frankly ran this entire campaign on the assumption that it was done and dusted after the Pran Pratishtha happened in the month of January. But the real bread and butter issues which are now surfacing, in your opinion, in your current poll, tells you that unemployment, food inflation, that is the core part, that is really the one that has destroyed a large part of India's rural and urban, struggling middle class and those in the lower category. They have been devastated. Now, if you look at the coalition, Rahul, as a whole, when will it get tested? It will get tested when the BJP party as a party is actually got a comment on Chandrababu Naidu's manifesto. You should read that, on what plans they have for the emancipation of minorities. I personally feel it's a good manifesto. But on the other hand, you have a political party that has publicly been hugely critical of exactly the same elements of the manifesto of their partner in Andhra. So I think that's going to be the test. The CAA is going to be a test. How are you going to implement the CAA? Will the one nation, one poll happen? Will Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar go with that? I think in terms of cooperative federalism, that is an absolutely no-go. I don't see Mr. Modi being able to push through that at all. Then these were his big agendas pre this election. And my one point to one of the gentlemen on the program who talked about the foreign policy, let's be real here, Rahul. India's neighborhood policy is a disaster. China has encircled India through its investments across our territories around in our neighboring area, and we are also hugely responsible for showing the kind of hubris that we have demonstrated.
Okay.
And I do believe India is voting for the old idea of India, not for the new idea of India, which I presume.
Now this is an important point that Sanjay Jha and several commentators who lean towards the opposition are making, that India is voting again for the old idea of India, not for this new idea of India. Yashwant Deshmukh, the thing is, after the results come out, everybody has his own interpretation. Now, this whole idea